We can hear her.
Perfect. Well, I can get started. Thank you so much, Charlie. Hi, everyone. My name is Shrina Kurani, and I'm running for Congress in California's new 41st Congressional District against Ken Calvert. I say that I'm running against Ken Calvert because regardless of the outcome in June, I will put my full support behind the Democratic nominee because I'm here for one reason: to kick out Ken Calvert and bring real representation to our district. Thank you, PD Greens, for taking the time to have me on today. This is my home. I'm born and raised in Riverside County, and if we don't work together, Palm Desert, parts of Cathedral City, and Palm Springs will be represented by a Republican. But there's hope. Just like we did in 2012, you and I can work together to keep Palm Desert blue, and we have a real chance to unseat Ken Calvert. My parents immigrated in the 80s, and they came to the United States seeking opportunity. I grew up in my parents' small business, a swimming pool and spa supply store. They worked 7 days a week, and I spent my summers and days after school playing amongst pool filters and pumps until I started helping myself, sweeping floors, testing water for chlorine and alkalinity. My dad ran for city council when I was 12, and that was my first time door knocking and phone banking and fundraising. But this was just a few years after 9/11, and we also faced people who would see me and my brother, teenagers at their door, campaigning for our dad, and scream at us, calling us terrorists, slamming the door in our face. And we have a responsibility to fight extremism and fear with truth and a vision for the future. I graduated from my public high school as valedictorian at the age of 16, and I chose to stay local and go to UC Riverside, where I studied mechanical engineering to make things work better. I worked through school, including as an engineering consultant, to help businesses transition from natural gas to renewable energy, and on a design project for NASA for a crater on the South Pole of the moon. During my work in renewable energy, I became frustrated with the short-term profit motives, and that's created resistance for long-term change. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I paid my way through graduate school and got a degree in sustainability while working in Europe to use science to inform policy, including serving with delegations to the United Nations climate change negotiations since the Paris Agreement was signed. Back in California, I worked to start companies aimed at reducing waste and creating sustainable solutions for food and water, and developing ways to make healthcare and education more affordable, accessible, equitable, and just plain effective. This is going to be one of the most watched races in the country. And to win, we're going to need to raise resources, which we've done. We're building a grassroots campaign, and we already have a powerful volunteer base. And we're building a campaign with a strong team, from Representative Katie Porter's campaign manager from 2018, who helped her flip Orange County blue, to Representative Dr. Raul Ruiz's voter outreach team. We have a strong base of support that has run similar races and won, and know our region well. I know PD Greens were instrumental in Congresswoman Ruiz's historic election in 2012, and all of you here put in the work that flipped the valley. I know your lawn sign distribution, headquartered out of Charlie's home, is legendary. I support the work and activism and leadership of the PD Greens, and I support your push for a 5-district city council. I need your support to ensure that we protect a woman's right to choose and access healthcare, to ensure that our region here in the Valley doesn't have poor air quality from a decaying Salton Sea, to ensure that Palm Desert continues to welcome tourists and visitors that respect our neighborhoods and don't turn them into party short-term rentals, to ensure that veterans in our communities access the services and healthcare they deserve, to ensure that we continue to protect Social Security and Medicare for vulnerable older Americans, and to ensure that we have fair representation in the Palm Desert City Council. I want to work with each of you to keep this valley blue. I'm running for Congress to bring my approach to making things work better to Washington, to put people first, create a sustainable future, and build an America where people feel safe, healthy, and have opportunities to succeed. Regardless of the outcome in June, I will put my full support behind the Democratic nominee because I am here for one reason: to kick out Ken Calvert and bring real representation to our district. I am proud to continue to work alongside all of you, and I humbly ask you for your vote at the pre-endorsement conference. You can find out more about our campaign at shrinakurani.com, and we'll put more links in the chat. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. My goodness. That's my goodness. Okay. All right. So I'm not going to comment further, but this is a good start to our introduction to our candidates. All right. So thank you. So I am going to, the next candidate is Brandon Mosely. And we will see if we can get him on in full picture and turn it over to Brandon Mosely, Pastor Brandon Mosely. All right, I'm the Reverend Charles Ara, if you don't know that, but I don't think my wife knows that I'm a reverend. But anyway, okay, Brandon Mosely, it's your turn.
Hi, thank you so much, Reverend. Thank you so much. So first and foremost, I think with Will and Shrina, I think they both know where I stand in terms of supporting, loving, and showing grace to both of them. I think it's very key that we continue to do so. I greeted both of them first time I met them with big hugs because I look at it as we're family at the end of the day, a Democratic family. And I just want to make sure we have a chance to flip this district blue. I was under Mary Bono Mack at one point. So that was a terrible position to be under, and just to see what you guys have been able to do in the desert is amazing. But my name is Brandon Mosely, and of course I'm running for California 41st Congressional District. We launched this campaign in the summertime. It's been amazing, the support we've been able to receive. Thousands of people across the district and across the country have supported our campaign, and we built a true people-powered campaign. With that being said, we've been able to have almost 25 elected officials support our campaign, from Christy Hostage to Lisa Middleton to Sabrina Cervantes, just to name a few. We have 4 national PACs supporting our campaign as well, Voting Protection Project with Andrew Jans, and a couple unions as well. We've been able to do that. It's been humbling to say the least. And I think the reason why we've been able to do that, because our message is working class at the end of the day, advocating for regular people. My parents moved to Riverside County looking for that American dream, looking to buy a home. When they got here, they saw amazing opportunities. And what we have today, we're at a crossroads. We have Ken Calvert, who's been sitting there for almost 30 years in the way of progress, in the way of working class people. And I always joke with people that we started this campaign nearly 30 years ago. Not that I was 5 years old trying to run for Congress, but he's been sitting in the way of progress and sitting in the way of working class people since then. We're at a crossroads, and Dr. King says in his very last book entitled, "Where do we go from here, community or chaos?" And it's clear that Ken Calvert is moving us towards chaos, and we have to move towards community, that unity that we just talked about. I think it's so important that we continue to do that, because Dr. King says in that same book that it's going to take power infused with love to turn a dark yesterday into a brighter tomorrow. And we have the power to turn it into a brighter today. And I truly believe that we can do that, and we can flip this district blue. When my family moved here from Compton, California, my mom being a bus driver, my dad being a pastor, I would go to church every single day, not because I just love church, because being the 5th out of 6 kids, that was the only way that I could spend time with my dad. I started servicing my community at the age of 6. I even started giving my very first sermon at the age of 6. And that's when I fell in love with service. And this last quote that's always been tied to my life and has been a North Star to me is that anybody can be great because anybody can serve. All you have to do is have a heart full of grace and a soul full of love. And I think it's so important for us to send someone great to Congress, not great because of money, not great because of position, not great because of who they know, great because they want to serve their community, and they have been serving their community. I became a teacher after I went to college, but one thing about college, I was the first person to go to college in my family. When I went there, I knew nothing about how to pay for college. I literally went on a Hope Scholarship, and that Hope Scholarship didn't come with any money. It came with me hoping and praying that I'll find a way to pay for college. I remember sitting in my class, being tapped on the shoulder, being told that you're no longer on the roster, go to the finance department. I went there, they looked me in my eyes and said, "Brandon, how are you going to pay for college?" I looked back right at them and said, I don't know. I hope we can find a way. My way was actually working full time at Nordstrom's and selling shoes. I even worked full time when I went to DC to intern for Tammy Baldwin, working on the weekends, working almost 40, 50 days straight without a day off, because I knew that was going to take for me to get to the middle class. I remember sitting in my apartment trying to figure out how I was going to pay for school, books, and how I was going to pay for groceries. I was sitting on the doorstep of poverty, going to checking and cash places to try to float every 2 weeks. And that's why I became a teacher, because I did not want students to be in the wealthiest nation on earth and continue to try to figure out how they're going to make it to the middle class and mortgage their future in college. With that being said, I've been able to send so many students to college, and I also became an adult educator, and I helped so many people who migrated here to America to get their GED, their high school diploma. And those stories that they would tell me remind me of my grandfather, who came here from the Bahamas Islands with nothing. We joke and say he came on the Hope Boat. His first job was picking oranges in Florida, second job picking apples in New York. He was a migrant worker. He fell in love with my grandmother, a daughter of a sharecropper. And when they fell in love, they ended up moving to California, worked hard, and bought the first house. But unfortunately, working hard does not equate going to the middle class any longer. It takes a lot more than hard work nowadays. And that's why we need to send a working class advocate, because working class people can feel the chips stacked up against them each and every day. They're going into the grocery stores and have to decide what they're going to pay for and what they're going to put back. They have to decide if they can fill their tank up or not. They have to decide what bills they can pay. They have to make a decision between, how do I send my kid to college? What can I afford? What can I do? And with that being said, there's not enough people in Washington talking about their needs and advocating for them. We have to ensure that every person in America has a chance for that American dream. And with that being said, so many times I'm being asked, you're sacrificing time with your 2 boys, you're sacrificing time with your wife, you're already a teacher, you're already a pastor, you already have your own nonprofit that you worked with the 9 political points to make sure police reform actually happens. With that being said, that I always will tell them one thing. I said, you know what? It's worth the sacrifice. And I tell them this proverb that when we get to heaven, they're going to ask us to show our scars. And you have no scars to show. They're going to say, was there not anything on earth worth fighting for? And I always truly believe that women reproductive rights is worth fighting for. Equality and equity is worth fighting for. A living wage is worth fighting for. Union rights are worth fighting for. I believe all these things that we need and desire from our environment to healthcare is worth fighting for and earning some scars behind. I truly believe that we have fighters in Palm Springs, we have fighters in West Coachella Valley, we have fighters in Southwest Riverside that are willing to gain their scars and fight for the people who've been marginalized and been forgotten about. With that being said, I truly believe it's going to take all of us. One of my favorite proverbs says this from Africa, that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. So it's going to take a rainbow coalition of all of us. I've been able to build a coalition so far, but I truly believe there's so many more people that we can gather together to send Ken Calvert home for once and for all. My father used to tell me this, and I will end with this, that Brandon, you need 3 things to be successful in any passion you have. He said, you need time, so put your time in, work hard. You need your talent, put your best forward, and you need treasure. And I truly believe, and I hope that each and every one of you will think about and consider giving one of those 3, that time, that talent, or treasure, to this campaign at BrandonMosely.com. And I truly believe that we lead in hope, anticipating something greater, something better, that all the fear that the Republican Party is trying to use to try to stagnate or cause people to fight in division, that we can fight against that with hope, with plans, with ideas, with love, with grace. And I truly believe that we can do it. So please follow me at Mosely for Congress. And please also go to BrandonMosely.com. Thank you so much for considering supporting me. And I hope that I can earn your support in the long run and that I can be a working class advocate for you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you. Thank you. You know, sometimes the word politician has a negative concept, but what you're saying is very true. In wanting to help set public policy for the benefit of everyone, it involves sacrifice. You know, and we want to appreciate all 3 of you candidates for sacrificing, you know, your time and making this a priority. in bringing us a Democratic victory. So with that said, the next candidate is Will Rollins. There he is. All right. Okay. So now it's your turn to go ahead. We'll listen to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Charlie. It's great to see some familiar and new faces on the Zoom today. For those of you who don't know me, let me tell you who I am, why I'm running, and most importantly, why I can beat the January 6th Republican who's right here in our backyards this year. So my name is Will Rollins. I'm a Southern California native with family in Murrieta. And I just moved with my partner Paolo to Palm Springs from Canyon Lake, where I grew up coming year after year as a kid. I also grew up wanting to work in national security because of September 11th. So when I was a junior in high school, walked into my first class of the day to see the North Tower of the World Trade Center collapse. And it was at 16 years old, seeing people jump out of those buildings to their deaths, that I knew I wanted to serve my country. There was just one problem. I was a closeted gay kid who grew up when it was still against the law to serve openly in the United States military. But thanks to older generations who fought and died to open doors for people like me and great parents and teachers, I made it through Dartmouth and Columbia Law School and got a job as a federal prosecutor, where I finally got to do what I'd always wanted to do: work in counterterrorism and counterintelligence, protecting all of the people in Riverside County and all of the new Congressional District 41. And it was a privilege to be a part of the team that helps protect the United States from adversaries like Russia, Iran, China, and Al-Qaeda. But working in counterterrorism these past few years, I became acutely aware that some of our biggest threats are now right here at home. Whether it's the white supremacists who attacked Charlottesville, to the QAnon conspiracy theorists who went after Navy hospital ships, the horrifying rise in hate crimes across the country in 2020 and 2021. And then about a year ago, as we all know, January 6th happened, and I had a chance to help prosecute some of the people who attacked the US Capitol. And it was responding to that attack and the image of guns drawn on the floor of the US House of Representatives that convinced me to run against Ken Calvert, a Republican who tried to overturn the presidential election and then publicly called for charges against the insurrectionists to be dropped. And I'll come back to Ken Calvert in a minute, but first I want to tell you about one of the defendants I prosecuted after January 6th, who used to be a Beverly Hills salon owner. So she became convinced that she needed to stop the steal. She allegedly packed up her stuff, flew to DC, used a bullhorn to call for angry patriots to bring in weapons to stop the peaceful transfer of power. And then she stood in a hallway as a Capitol police officer was crushed in a door by her fellow rioters. All of us need to ask ourselves, how do we stop what led people like a Beverly Hills salon owner to become radicalized enough that she needed to fly across the country and believe she had to invade the US Capitol? Because that kind of toxic extremism has become systemic, and it goes beyond just one bad president who lost by more than 7 million votes. I'm running because if we truly care about our democracy, if we truly care about something as fundamental as the freedom to choose our own leaders, we cannot stop fighting against the far-right forces and broken information system that led to the attack in the first place. So I'm running to propose specific new laws designed to break down the polarized disinformation echo chambers online, on TV, and on the radio that are making it impossible for the country to govern itself. We need those new laws now. That means strengthening antitrust and FCC rules to break down propaganda networks, requiring transparency in advertising, and creating a modern fairness doctrine similar to what our country used after World War II that will apply not only to cable TV and radio, but also to social media so that Americans are no longer brainwashed by one-sided disinformation. Until we address that problem, change is impossible. But when we finally do update those laws to address 21st century technology, we can create an informed public capable of building consensus and shine a light on the provable fact that people like my opponent, Ken Calvert, are a threat to democracy and that he has consistently voted against the interests of the people who actually live here. As many of you know, Ken Calvert voted to overturn the 2020 presidential election. He voted against the January 6th commission. And as I mentioned earlier, he called for charges against the insurrectionists to be dropped. But he's not only spread lies about the presidential election in 2020, he thinks climate change is a hoax. He's anti-choice, anti-background check for guns, anti-immigrant, and has one of the worst LGBTQ records of any members in Congress. I left my job as a federal prosecutor to run for Congress because we need a new generation of leaders to step up for the United States and fight against Calvert's brand of far-right extremism. We need leaders who will enact specific new laws designed to create systemic compromise instead of systemic division before it's too late. Because I know that when Americans can start agreeing on basic facts again, we can work together to tackle the big issues of our generation. Reforming our criminal justice system, improving access to healthcare for our seniors and veterans, making billionaires pay their fair share, and protecting our planet. But most urgently of all, we need to unite against the people who undermine democracy, voting rights, and basic human rights in 2022. The people who enabled the attack on the Capitol don't deserve to work inside of it. So that's a little bit about who I am and why I'm running. Let me tell you quickly why I can beat Ken Calvert. First, revolutionary grassroots field operation to drive turnout. Was proud to have launched the campaign with John Ossoff's field director from 2017 in Georgia. California's redistricting commission, as you all know, just finalized new congressional maps that shifted this district from a Trump +7 to virtually tied. About 1% of all votes separated Joe Biden and Donald Trump in the new district lines. And there are 90,000 voters in the district with no party preference. I was incredibly pleased to chat with both Congressman Mark Takano and Congressman Raul Ruiz last weekend about what they think needs to get done in this district and how to do it. And second, the new district, as you all know, includes Palm Desert and Palm Springs. If I'm elected, we would make history. I'd be the second openly gay man in Congress from California ever. And Calvert has never faced a Democrat with a national security background before. I've already gotten support not only from Democrats, but also from independents and even some Republicans who are horrified by January 6th. I will get some of the 90,000 independents we need to flip this seat. And as a gay former prosecutor who will aggressively fight against Calvert's horrific record on LGBTQ rights, I think our community will be able to drive record turnout in Palm Springs and beyond. This is the first congressional midterm in California history in which every registered voter will get a mail-in ballot, and we need your help to get them to send it in. And third, I just set the quarterly record for the most amount of money any Democrat has ever raised against Calvert, going all the way back to 1992 in a quarter. Within just about 9 weeks of our public launch, we raised over $310,000, which exceeded what Calvert himself raised from individual contributors by $130,000. No Democrat has done that before. And we are building a coalition that can flip this seat. I am incredibly proud to have the support of local elected officials like Council members Christy Holstage and Jeff Coors of Palm Springs, Mayor Tim Sheridan of Lake Elsinore, Victory Fund, US Congressman Brad Sherman, the first member of the United States House to endorse a Democratic candidate in this race, the team that helped get John Ossoff elected to the US Senate in Georgia, Victory Fund, and Equality PAC, which represents every LGBTQ member of the United States Congress. And so with your help, I promise you that I can beat Ken Calvert in 22, and I will treat the job and this country with the kind of integrity and respect that they deserve. Thank you all again for making the time for me. And I ask for your vote coming up at February 12th, and happy to take any questions that you all might have.
All right, thank you very much to all three candidates. And I think what we'll do is do have a question period, but I want to be reminded of what my homiletics professor taught me in the seminary about a good sermon. The 3 B's of a good sermon: be bright, be brief, and be gone. Be bright, be brief, and be gone. So all of you were very good in your 7 minutes, and in responding to the questions, just keep it down to be bright, be brief, and be gone, and we'll give everybody an equal chance. So I think Nancy has the first question, and then we'll go to Carlos.
Hi, my name is Nancy Brown Park, and I live in Palm Desert. I am currently on Congressman Ruiz's advisory board for veterans. So I would like to know what your plan is for veterans in the Valley. He's done an amazing job during his tenure. So do you have a plan in place? And I guess each candidate, so we just briefly tell me what your plan is would be great. We could start with alphabetically. So my husband said alphabetically.
How about alphabetical by first name this time?
Okay, great,
Don't
Gary.
speak French. There we go.
All right, perfect. Great question. For my family, veterans are really, truly important. My uncle was a Purple Heart. He received it in the Vietnam War, and I host of uncles and aunts that joined the military. But I think most importantly, one thing that I see that Representative Takano is pushing for, and I think that we need to as well, that veterans will be automatically enrolled in healthcare, which isn't happening right now. That's something that he's fighting for, and I want to be a part of that bandwagon and push for that as well. I want to make sure that we send money to those veterans and support to those veterans who are being forgotten, that's living homeless on the streets right now, that need more support, that they need a way to be able to get those resources at the end of the day. So those are two things I think is so important: their healthcare and also their resources that for some reason being forgotten about.
Thank you. All right, next to respond to that.
Yeah, I believe I'm up next. Well, thank you so much for this question. I think it's incredibly important. And as we mentioned, I think healthcare is one of the biggest issues that we're facing across the board, right? But that also includes, especially when it comes to homelessness, mental health care, right? So this is, of course, making sure that we have access with the VA and our veterans are being supported across the board. But this is starting to transcend not just a physical healthcare issue of being able to see a doctor, but making sure that you have someone to talk to, that you're not facing loneliness, and that you actually have the mental health services that you also deserve. So I think it comes from across the board, from needing to make sure that healthcare is point one, including the mental health care services, addressing homelessness, and just making sure that our veterans are taken care of and given the due respect that they deserve.
All right, Will.
Thanks, Charlie. So I wouldn't be here without veterans. Literally, my grandparents met during the Coast Guard in World War II. And so I think, there are three things that to me stand out as the most urgent. VA facilities, we need to get $10 to $25 million in federal funding for VA facilities in California's 41st Congressional District. We need to guarantee healthcare for all veterans. Agree with Brandon and Shrina on that. And third, I think this is one that all too often falls by the wayside: jobs, 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 jobs. If you served in the United States military overseas, if you put your life on the line, you deserve to be able to come back to the United States and have a job. And if I'm elected to Congress in California's 41st, I promise you that every veteran who did that, I will make it my mission to make sure that they have employment when they come back from serving our country overseas.
All right, all three of you did very good with the three B's. Bright, be brief, and be good. You all did very good. Carlos has his hand up, is that right? Okay, go ahead, Carlos.
Hi, the New York Times just reported that the Republican National Committee had an overwhelming vote to censure Representatives Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger of Washington for participating in the House investigation of January 6th, saying the people there were participating in, or rather the committee was involved in the persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. That is now how they are referring to the January 6th event, legitimate political discourse. How do you relate to an opponent and many of your constituents, eventual potential constituents, who are so completely disassociated from reality?
Let's see, who's gonna be first here?
You want to do reverse alphabetical order this time?
Yeah, okay.
By
All
first
right.
name.
Will
Reverse
Rollins, yeah,
Will,
reverse.
go ahead.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary. I get the W and the R, so I'm always at the end. I appreciate that. And I actually saw that same alert pop up on my phone a minute ago, and I could not, I could not believe my eyes. I think that the truth of the matter is that this is going to take time. And I've got family members who voted for Donald Trump. I've got friends who are Republicans, and it's going to take, genuine engagement and open-mindedness to listening and being acutely aware that there are fundamental divisions in the country that need to be resolved, not just through politicians talking about wanting to bring people together, but the area where I think there is room for consensus is on the agreement that polarization is a threat to the United States. Now, Democrats and Republicans might disagree about who's to blame for it. And obviously votes like the one today cannot, you can't underscore that more than that by seeing an alert like that pop up on your phone from the New York Times. But having said that, members of both parties agree that it needs to be addressed. And I think not enough candidates are talking about specific plans about how you attack the root of systemic division. And the reality is, post 1987, post repeal of the Fairness Doctrine, the rise of hate-filled clickbait and right-wing media that has got profit motives that are driven on fueling this cycle of disinformation, that can be addressed through smart legislation that has nothing to do with regulating the content of what people say or censorship, but that provides time and space for a response so that we aren't completely siloed off from one another. And I think that until we step forward with the specific proposals that I talked about a few minutes ago, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so I hope that there's the ability to build consensus around that, because when you even talk to family and friends or other Republicans in the district, they agree polarization is a problem. So now let's get some leaders to step up to the plate with specific ideas to update our regulations and fix it.
Wow, okay. Next, alphabetically, if we can, I guess that would be Brandon.
No, that would be Shrina.
Yep, happy to go next. I think there's a lot of issues here that I think need to be addressed. I think first and foremost, addressing the root cause of why we have these issues in the first place. And I think a lot of it comes down to disinformation, right? It comes down to where are people actually getting their information sources from? Who do they trust in their communities to actually verify the information that they're getting? And I think it comes down to actually back to the basics of grassroots organizing, right? How do we make sure that we're actually listening to our communities, that we're actually reaching people here? As we've seen with Ken Calvert, he doesn't hold town halls. He doesn't have opportunities to actually share what is happening in Congress and how can we make sure to keep our local communities informed, updated, and keep our local electeds accountable to actually what we're doing. So I think we need to address the fact that misinformation and disinformation is a huge problem that we're seeing across the board. We need to make sure that our elected officials are being held accountable to actually communicating with their constituents and actually hearing what people care about, what their issues are. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to live in a safe community. Everyone wants to be able to live a healthy life. Everyone wants to be able to take care of their families and make sure that they're living in an area where they feel safe. And if we can agree on these basic values and understand that we're operating from the same place, then I think we'll actually be able to bring a lot more people in. I grew up in a conservative Republican household, and I think there is a huge opportunity to be able to have a real discussion around what this means and actually look to the facts of what has actually happened and have a true dialogue.
All right. Next.
So thank you so much, guys. Great question. I think the root of this issue is anger, right? These people go and try to find information on the dark web. It's not just Fox News anymore, it's the dark web. So what are they angry about? And this is the same anger that we've seen from slavery on forward. And this anger comes from economic issues, blaming other people why they don't have the economic resources, right? And a lot of times who's telling them to blame other people are those wealthy people who are sitting in power, right? We have to understand that there's more that unites us than divides us. And one thing that truly unites us is the idea that we all want to live the American dream. So we have to have this discussion with these people in grace, and love and listen to them and hear them out. And I can promise you, we can figure out a lot of the anger comes from not having enough money at the end of the month, right? Outside of that, education is key. What we need to see is an investment in advocacy programs in the high school level. Government has simply become just simply that, a government class, half a year that just tells you the basics of government. Going back 30 years ago, it was a civics course, right? What we've seen through studies, students who are exposed to advocacy programs are more open-minded, and they leave out more engaged. So that's one thing we need to do. Outside of that, I think a lot of people can really truly agree that we need term limits. We have consistently the same people in Congress that's being propped up by the same money. So that dark money, we have to end Citizen United. Also, what we need to look into is looking at voting rights and also looking at gerrymandering. What happens is we have too many people coming from districts like Marjorie Taylor Greene, that she's going to win no matter how much money we put into it, because almost 80% of the people at that district believes Trump is amazing, right? So that's because of gerrymandering. So we have to make sure we see what we see in California, a fair process in redistricting and ensuring that everyone has the right to vote. Because until that happens, these people in office are going to continue to spit the same information to their base because they don't have to compromise. There is no power in compromise for them, because at the end of the day, they can go back to their base and do what they want. That's why Ken Calvert for so long didn't have to have any town hall meetings, because he knew his base. And that's why he continued to get so much money. That's why people can raise a lot of money with 200 people giving to their campaign. That's a problem. I've been able to fight and have thousands and thousands of people donate to my campaign on average of $50. The reason why, because we're talking to average voters who care about the economy. And I think that's one thing that we have to focus on. But great question. Thank you.
Wow, well, I'm learning a lot. This is very educational. Wow, for all of us here. All right. Yeah, so all these good, great candidates. Thank you. Should we allow one more question? I think we have time for one more question. And yeah, let's ask the Honorable Karina Quintanilla. We'll have her ask a question. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Everyone's doing a great job. I love the energy, and I want to throw a question that affects us very deeply here in Riverside County. I just saw something about our sheriff, being in the headlines. And sorry, my parent wants to contribute her views on our sheriff. So that's my question. I am so sorry. Let me throw some snacks at her. My question is, how do you feel is the best way to address the rise of the constitutional sheriff? And that is very much a problem in a lot of rural communities, but here in Riverside County, we're seeing the way extremism thrives when the sheriff refuses to even declare certain things a hate crime. So what is your specific approach to constitutional sheriffs? Thank you.
Gary, you want to decide who speaks first?
Oh,
how about a different one? Can we do it by birth month? Who was born earliest? That way it's no alphabet.
Okay, well, let's see. I don't know anyone's birthday.
I'm definitely at the end. My birthday
I'm in September, baby.
I'm December.
All right.
So.
You might be first. Will, I'm November.
Okay. September, November, December. All right. So yeah, I mean, I think having worked with some great public corruption prosecutors when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, people who, including the chief of the criminal division, who prosecuted the officers who beat Rodney King, and then Liz Rhodes, who was one of the prosecutors who went after Sheriff Lee Baca for his corruption in the LA County Sheriff's Department. I am acutely aware that in order for all of us to be living under the rule of law, nobody can be above it. And when you have people who are elected officials in the Sheriff's Department that are refusing to enforce laws that are passed by the majority of us, who are taking the laws into their own hands, it is a huge alarm bell for our democracy. And so I think that what we need to do is enact a couple of different specific reforms that will ensure that our democracy remains strong in the face of people who want to take the law into their own hands. One is making sure that there is oversight and accountability that's independent of local law enforcement. So if a police shooting happens, the same department should not be charged with investigating that shooting. The federal government probably has a bigger role to play in those independent investigations than what we've allowed in the past. And I was pleased to see that the Justice Department finally announced a domestic terrorism unit within DOJ to deal with some of the extremism. And as all of us have read about in the papers, some of the people who attacked the US Capitol had law enforcement ties. And this perception of mutual accountability is something that can be strengthened through federal legislation and oversight. That means increasing the independence of inspectors general at the federal level. It means providing for independent oversight of local law enforcement departments. It means for making sure that the same local departments that are engaged or participated or are reviewing a police shooting are not the ones that are investigating investigating it afterwards. And I think most important, one of the other things that a lot of people that I try to tell people when I'm campaigning is we need more progressives to go into law enforcement. We need people who understand that systemic racism is a real thing, because progressives in law enforcement have a lot of power to do good. And it doesn't mean ignoring the realities that there are a lot of dangerous people out there who do need to be in prison, but it requires being aware of some of the injustices that have affected people who are on the other side of that courtroom from you, who are sitting there in handcuffs, so that when it comes to sentencing and charging decisions, people who have a real understanding of our history and its legacy and the impacts that it has had on an individual human being are the ones making the decisions about who's going to be arrested, who's going to sign the no-knock warrant, and what is this person going to get when they're sentenced at the end of the day. And I think that if we've got folks who are progressive in law enforcement, that's a huge, huge tool to making sure that our communities are not only safe, but also that we're treating people fairly and justly under the law as our founders intended, and certainly post-Civil War, with the post-Civil War constitutional amendments, the country that we're trying to build through the civil rights movement, through our civil rights legislation that we can continue to strengthen, through the hate crime legislation that I would propose if elected. Those are the steps we need to take.
Yeah, and thank you for this. It's such an important question, right? Because this is affecting all of us across the county, right? Regardless of your congressional district, regardless of where you are, these are things that are making it so that people living in our communities don't feel safe, right? And especially when we talk about hate crimes, I mean, these are things that we've experienced personally and are issues that we need to take very seriously. I think first things first, we have to call it what it is. We have to call extremists what they are and recognize that this is absolutely not acceptable and that we need to make sure that we have a new sheriff in town, right? So I think working together to make sure that we have the right folks in these places of power that actually can be held accountable. We know that law enforcement needs oversight. We need to make sure that we have the opportunity to actually keep our community safe, because that is the absolute bare minimum of what we deserve, right? I think first and foremost, calling it what it is, we have to acknowledge that we need new officials in place. We need to make sure that law enforcement does actually have the oversight to ensure that as we're going through all of the various steps and acknowledging that the laws themselves need to be updated, if the sheriff is there to uphold the laws need to be updated. And we need to make sure that they are concrete and specific and actually addressing the crimes that we're seeing in our community, and that those people can be held accountable.
Oh, well, this is a great question. I mean, I'm just going to be transparent. Being an African-American male and having two young boys, this is a question I have to deal with all the time. My son loves police officers. And when George Floyd died, he had to watch some things on the news with me. And he asked me, "Dad, are cops bad people?" I had to tell him the people aren't always bad. the actions are and the system can be as well. It was difficult. It was hard because being so young, I don't want to crush his hopes, his dreams, or the people he look up to, right? Because I want him to feel like it's okay to go to a police officer for help. But knowing, being African American male, being someone in high school that I was an honor student, but being hemmed up by 3 police officers because they thought I snuck in a football game. These are memories I have. Being stopped and set on the corner for no reason. These are memories I have and I have to live with. But knowing so many police officers personally, and know some of them are good people. But here's the deal. We have to get to a point where there's no more, oh, there's only a few bad apples. We have to have a consistent way to measure that every police officer is doing their job, because we don't want to have a few bad nurses because that equates to some people dying, right? I was able to start a nonprofit because of people like Mike Brown, people like Philando Castile. And this nonprofit is called PUSH, People United Servicing Hope. We push for a 9-point police reform. Some of you might remember me coming out to the desert talking about it. Some of the points talked about the oversight board, talked about an advisory board, community policing, where police actually get out their patrol cars and walk their beat and make relationships and create relationships with the people in the community. We see this is a vast difference between what we see today. We talked about a transparent database that's so necessary, because police officers who end up doing some of these shootings have 20, 30 different infractions against them. And this is not something I've been talking about. This is something I've been pushing for almost the last 2 years. And some of these ideas ended up in the George Floyd Policing Reform Act. My plan dates it by almost a year. So with that being said, we have to be able to build community and relationships with our police officers. We also have to make sure we hold them accountable. And that's why the oversight board is so important. When we sent that as a Democratic Party, this idea, when I spoke to Tisa Rodriguez, she sent this idea to the sheriff. Being the sheriff supposed to sit on so many boards, so many panels together, he wouldn't show up. Of course, I wonder why. But when he got this idea, he completely turned it down and said that we were trying to plan a way to make an oversight board full of BLM people. And realistically, we wanted community involvement to ensure that his officers and him don't overstep the boundaries, which we see today. His response was, well, people voted me in, that's the only oversight we need. And as we know, those who actually lived in Riverside County during the time, we know he came with a falsehood, almost like a different person. Then all of a sudden, we started to see the transformation of the far right. We start to see that he surely wants something bigger than just being a sheriff, of course. And I think what we see what Joy Silver's doing is amazing, making sure that we can find someone who can run against them, and hopefully with the supervisor board, we can push for some of these changes to happen. Federally, we need these changes as well. We also need to make sure we take funding away from police departments who simply want to look more like a military outpost. This is so important that we do that, and so important that we hold this sheriff accountable. And it's going to take all of us doing it, because right now he's holding barbecues and hundreds of people are showing up, fanboying and fangirling over him because he doesn't want to push mask mandates, and he's an oath keeper. That's a scary place to be. Especially if you're a person of color, especially if you're marginalized, especially if you're other. It's a scary place to be. It's scary if you're a liberal. It's scary. So we have to hold them accountable and ensure that we don't see this any longer, and place these reforms where they need to be, and hopefully get him out of office. So thank you guys. Great question.
Okay, our time in a sense is almost up. We have these 3 excellent candidates, but however, why can't we even get one candidate to run against the Sheriff Bianco? We need as Democrats, we need some internal look. We need to see where our weakness is here, and it's a shame. There should never be a runoff where there is no Democrat in it. I mean, we got so many good Democrats, and you 3 of you have so much depth. I wish we could have all 3 of you into one so that you can represent us. Thank you very much for giving of your time, and thank you for all the participants. And I don't know what else to say. I wear so many hats. I want to say one more thing. I'm as guilty as prejudice as anybody here. When I was the president of the Hubert Humphrey Democratic Club way back 30 years ago, I thought I invited Sheriff Lee Baca to be a speaker, and I assumed he was a Democrat because he was Hispanic. That was part of my prejudice. And then after we have them all scheduled, people are saying, how come you are inviting a Republican to speak to a Democratic club? So I have to be educated myself, and through there was a nurse. I ran into a lady at Kaiser, and I said, she had a white coat on, and I said, are you an LVN or an RN? And she looked at me and said, and she was black, so she looked at me and said, no, I'm a doctor. And I said, oh, that's my prejudice, the way I was raised. I would never think that, so we all have our kind of, in my 91 years of life, I have to do the same thing, be bright, be brief, and be gone. But anyway, God bless you all. God bless your efforts here. We're 100% behind all of you, and let's really unite and get that seat for Democrats and get rid of Mr. Calvert. God bless you all. We can leave this meeting. All right. Thank you,
Charlie. Thank you for
Thanks,
putting this
everyone.
together. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm going to do what I can to work with Nancy to get this recording on our Facebook page and on YouTube so we can share it with others, because what a fantastic group. We have a very difficult decision to make between these three candidates. And thank you, everyone, for participating. Great questions. Great to see everyone here today.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Charlie, 91, you look amazing, man. Just wanted to tell you that. And he works Zoom like nobody's business. So that's amazing. I want to get like you when I grow up. Thank you all.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Go
Stay healthy.
Democrats, go blue. All right.
Go Big Blue.
Go blue.